Hey everyone, thanks for watching our presentation on the fundamental properties of propellant aerosols. We'll be talking to you about the work we've been doing at Nanofarm to characterize droplet diameter, velocity, and surface charge of a high range of high and low global warming potential propellant aerosols that have been emitted from metered dose inhalers. And the goal of this study is to generate a data set that can be used to aid the formulation of greener pharmaceutical products in the future. Starting by looking at how we got to our current focus on greener propellants, the first MDI product is now 65 years old, and critically, many of the early formulations inside these products were based on CFC12. Then, in the 1980s, we became aware that the persistence of CFCs in the atmosphere and their ability to form radicals was leading to the depletion of the ozone layer. This then led to the signing of the Montreal Protocol, which introduced worldwide targets for the reductions of CFC use. We then identified and developed the first few products using alternative hydrofluoroalkane propellants, which had the appropriate vapor pressures but negligible ozone depletion potentials. In recent years, the focus has returned again to these propellants as, despite their low ozone depleting potential, their contribution to the greenhouse effect is significant. And this in turn is going to lead to the reformulation of many previous products into new lower global warming potential propellants, and also the formulation of novel products into those same propellants as well. Following this, the industry is now appraising a number of alternatives, notably the hydrofluoroalkane HFA-152A and the hydrofluoroolefin HFO-1234ZE, both shown here on this slide. There are a number of factors that need to be considered in the development of drug products using these propellants, ranging from selection of the propellants themselves to the container closure systems used, and then optimization of the formulations inside these products to achieve the critical performance criteria which will ensure that the products deliver APIs to the site of action in sufficient quantities. The focus of this study was to measure and compare the fundamental aerosol properties of the placebo formulations containing these propellants. The properties we focused on were the evolution of droplet size and velocity within the plume and droplet surface charge, with the ultimate goal of generating a dataset to guide future formulation efforts. So, as stated in the previous slide, the propellants investigated in this study were the currently used HFA-134A and 227, and then the low global warming potential propellants HFA-152A and HFO-1234ZE. The table on this slide, taken from the Summary of Environmental Issues Surrounding MDIs published by John Pritchard last year, shows some of the key physicochemical quantities that can guide our discussion. The first is the boiling points of these propellants. As you can see, they're sufficiently low, in the range of the previously used HFAs and also CFC12, to achieve atomization and can be used as primary propellants in MDI formulations. They also possess a range of dipole moments that are similar to the previously used HFA propellants, and this information, alongside a consideration of hydrogen bonding potential, can be used to help us understand water uptake and API and excipient solubility in these propellants when we begin developing formulations using them.
Placebo-uncoated canister comprising an amount equal to 250 doses of 4 different propellants, HFA-134A, HFA-227A, HFA-152A, and HFO-1234ZE, were manually filled and crimped with a standard Aptar valve with a volume of 50 microliter. A standard generic actuator with an orifice diameter of 0.48 and a jet length of 1.5 mm was employed to fire these placebo canisters. The charges generated from these placebo pMDIs were measured under ambient conditions using a bipolar charge analyzer. 8 shots were sampled by the bowler at 30 liters per minute. Water content in the pMDIs was quantified by Carl-Fisher titration. 5 shots were analyzed for each placebo canister. Finally, one-dimensional phase Doppler anemometry was conducted by focusing the measurement volume into a sealed window enclosure. A constant flow rate of 40 liters per minute was applied through the enclosure. Velocity and droplet diameter distributions over a number of positions within the spray plume were recorded.
The results for the number mean droplet diameter at several set distances from the actuator are shown here on the left, with the corresponding mean velocities on the right. For the diameter, at 20 mm from the actuator, both of the low global warming potential propellants have the greatest mean droplet diameter, with HFAs 134A and 227 being somewhat lower. Further from the actuator, this rank order changes, with 227 and HFO 1234ZE showing the largest droplet sizes. This non-simple relationship between diameter and distance from the actuator suggests some interplay between propellant vaporization and the dynamics of the fluid. The velocity shows a simpler relationship with distance for all four of the propellants, decaying to lower values the further we get from the actuator. Here, HFA 227 shows the greatest velocity and HFA 152A the smallest, with HFO and 134A being somewhere in the middle. Now, each of the numbers on these plots reduces a highly dynamic multimodal size distribution down to a single number, which is something of a simplification. To further investigate the dynamics of these propellants, we looked at the evolution of the size distributions over time at the shortest measured distance from the actuator. To investigate the dynamics of the droplet size evolution, we split the spray plume into 4 quadrants, each representing a quarter of the droplets arriving at the measurement volume. The plots on this slide show the size distribution for each of the propellants, starting with the first quadrant at the top of the screen and moving forward in time as we go down. Regarding the length of each quadrant, all propellants showed a similar trend, with the first 3 quadrants lasting between 10 and 30 milliseconds, followed by a longer 4th quadrant as the plumes started to tail off. Regarding the size distributions themselves, all propellants showed a similar evolution, starting with 2 major modes at around 1 and 10 microns each. The larger mode then shrinks as these droplets evaporate, and a smaller mode, around 100 nanometers, begins to grow. HFO 1234ZE shows slightly different dynamics to the HFA propellants in these plots, as its larger initial mode is of a higher density, but then shrinks more rapidly than the other propellants. This suggests some differences in the vaporization behavior of this propellant, which should be taken into consideration.
Surface charge and electrostatic characteristics of pMDIs are known to impact regional deposition in the airways. All propellants generated more positive charges than negative ones. Therefore, the net charges were all positive. The apparent charging propensity differed between the propellants, with HFA 152A higher than HFA 134A, higher than HFA 227A, which was finally higher than HFO 1234 zeta E in decreasing order. In particular, HFO 1234 zeta E generated near-neutral charges of both polarities. The charge behavior of propellant system cannot be attributed to just one parameter, but it is influenced by materials and geometry of all the pMDI components, such as metering chamber, valve stem, and actuator. The charge levels measured follow the ranking of their dipole moments and the electric constants for all propellants except for HFO 1234 zeta E. HFO 1234 zeta E charged the lowest even though its dipole moment was higher than of that of HFA 227A. However, its behavior can be explained by the solubility of water in the propellant, as it is the lowest for HFO 1234 zeta E. Charging propensity and water content were correlated for HFA 152A and HFA 134A, which reported the highest values for both. Storage condition could explain the higher water content observed in HFO 1234 zeta E compared to HFA 227A. All of these will affect product aerodynamic characteristics and stability, and should be taken into consideration when reformulating existing pMDIs in alternative propellants. So, in conclusions, employing a PDA, we were able to say that The mean droplet size at short distances was greater for the lower GWP propellants, but the rank order changed at greater distances from the actuator. The within plume dynamics of HFO-1234 zeta E differed from the other propellants, possessing a greater number of coarse droplets which vaporized more quickly. Bolar allowed us to define a ranking of surface charge for all of these different propellants, with HFA-152A higher than HFA-134A, higher than HFA-227A, which was finally higher than HFO-1234 zeta E. The charge levels measured by Bolar largely followed the ranking of their dipole moments and the electric constants, except for HFO-1234 zeta E, which generated near neutral charges. This characteristic was correlated to its low water solubility. All of these properties may determine relevant differences in aerosol deposition, and therefore specific excipients should be considered during formulation development. Finally, the results evidence as well the influence of valve, canisters, and actuators materials components. Therefore, device subassembly components and formulation composition should be considered following an holistic approach, since early development stages when reformulating existing pMDIs or new products with low GWP propellants. Thanks a lot for watching our presentation, and if you have any questions, comments, ideas, or you just want to exchange around these topics, please feel free to contact us.